Welcome, I'm Carrie from KRLC Studio here. We are on our 7th episode, signature number 6, and it's our last signature in this notebook series. The next episode, I'm going to be showing you how I do a croptic stitch in stitching all of my signatures to a hidden spine. Then after that, we're going to work on the cover, and I'm really excited for the cover because I always do the cover the very, very end. It's kind of like my cherry on top. So I'm really looking forward to that. In today's episode, we're going to work with 3 projects. So 2 smaller ones and 1 larger one. One of them is going to be working with transparency. The other one is going to be working with strips of paper. And the last one, we're going to make some trees as fold-outs, paper trees as fold-outs. And I'm going to show you how I do that. So don't forget to like and subscribe to my channel, and let's get started. Hey everybody, so this is our transparency project that we're going to do for our last signature. So what my idea is that I would print an image onto transparency. So I've already made all the pages to go into this main signature. I've taken some pictures from Pinterest. I'm going to print them onto some transparency. So I had this forever. So this is computer graphics. This transparency is specific for inkjet printers, and there's a clear side and there's sort of a rough side, and you print an image onto the rough side of the transparency. So my idea is that to take an image from Pinterest, print it on, cut it out, and actually put it onto one of my signature pages, and use it sort of as a fold so that I can write my words on the page and then fold it over so that my words can show through my transparency. So I kind of thought it would give it a pretty cool effect. The page that I have chosen is this page, this signature that I've done. I made this actual paper. I took and I dyed it with avocado. And it came out really pretty. It's avocado dyes things like a really pretty dusty rose, and I loved it. So I dyed some paper, I dyed some fabric, I dyed some lace, and it came out like beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So I'm going to show you what I'm going to do with this. So these are just examples because I wanted to just see that these actually worked first. So these are some examples. They turned out really beautiful. So I'm going to use these 2 examples for some other journal work that I'll do. But I just wanted to test it out, and it came out beautifully. So I'm going to show you now on my PowerPoint of how I set that up to be printed on. Here we are in my PowerPoint, and these are 2 images that I found on Pinterest. So I'm going to use 2 images because I want one on one side and one on the other side. I chose black and white. These images I found, and they're already black and white. If you have a colored image, you can either print with a colored image, or you can easily turn the colored image into a black and white. So all you would have to do is choose your image, and you know your image is chosen because you'll have sort of circles around the corners. You come up here to picture format, and then you come over here to color, and that will turn your image into a black and white. I made sure that when I chose the image and I blew it up, that I made sure one of the images try to be at least the size of my full page in my signature. The other one isn't going to be as much, but we'll just figure it out. If they're both smaller, that's okay. It's not a deal breaker to me. I have these images and I have it to full capacity. I am aware, once again, that when I do print, that there will be a space around my image, and there's nothing I can do about that. It just prints that way. Another thing that I forgot to mention is that when you do choose images, make sure that they have a very high contrast to them. So this one, because there's a lot of white and then plus dark in it, when I do write my words and this overlays over top of my words, I'll be able to see this quite clearly, and that's what I want. I chose this one because I really liked the effect of just kind of reaching out and finding who you are, finding, you know, Jesus Christ in your life and that type of thing. And I liked the door image because it goes back to the Matthew 7:7 where it's like, you know, knock and ye shall receive, and I kind of like that idea. Once you have everything where you want it to be, I have this on a landscape because I'm gonna slice this up. If your image and it's a larger image, then you want to make sure that your slide before you put your image on it is portrait. So portrait is, you know, this is portrait right here, but my slide is landscape because I'm going to put two images. I have two images here for it. So when I'm ready to print, I make sure that my transparency, depending on how my printer prints, my transparency is going to be printing on the rough part or the rough side of that transparency. I want to really make sure that I put my transparency in my printer before I click print, that it will print on the rough side. So depending on your printer, that page could be flat down and it goes up. So the rough side could be down and the shiny side up, or reverse. So just depending on how your pages print through your printer, you have to really make sure that you know which side that transparency is going into your printer. So I have my transparency in. I come up here to File, and then I go to Print. So for mine, it's my Ep.7. I come in here and I want to make sure Scale to Fit Paper. If I click that off, you can see I even have it even more, the largest that I possibly can. You'll have to kind of play around with your own printing settings or printer settings. Mine particularly, I want it to be as close to the edge as possible, as large as possible. So I want it to be grayscale. I don't want to use any of my color ink to do this. It's all going to be my black and white. And print all sides. I only have one slide, so that's fine. If I have multiple slides, I have to make sure that it's printing, you know, on the correct slide. So then I come up here and I click my print. Okay, and then we will see how that works out. One thing that I forgot to mention, you need to select on what kind of paper that you're going to be printing your image on. For mine in particular, because it's an Ep.7, and I went online and I checked this because there is no transparency paper that is selected here. There's none available. So I went online, I did some research for my printer, and it just said just print it out in plain paper. So I made sure that works. For yours, you'll have to go into your printer settings and see if there is a transparency setting for you. If there's not, then I would highly recommend that you look up online and what would be the best way to print your transparency using your printer and your model. So for my Ep.7, it's just plain paper. So I've taken it off of my printer and this is what I got. So there was a few things that I just needed to let you know. I actually had to put this on top, or just tape the corners down on top of a white piece of paper. As you can see, I tried to just use the transparency and it would just print a little bit and then just spit it out and it wouldn't print the rest. So I thought, well, maybe for my particular printer, it only did that because it wasn't registering, or it couldn't see anything that it was printing on. So it just sort of basically printed on a little bit and shut down because it didn't recognize it as paper. To correct that, I just taped it, just the corners on top of paper, so that when it fed it through, it recognized it and it could see underneath it. And that's kind of the magic of the transparency. Okay, so now I'm going to cut my little papers here. And when I taped it, I made sure that I wasn't taping on top of my transparency there. And this one. And that's okay, I'm going to be like cutting this up anyway. One thing as well is that after you finish printing it, I would let it sit for about 5 to 10 minutes just so that the ink on top of your transparency completely dries. When I put this on my white paper, this printed quite quickly, and so I just made sure that I let it dry a little bit. You can tell which side that it's printed on, because if you take it out, it'll kind of come off in your hands. But if you let it dry, it shouldn't do that. So I'm going to cut this up now. There is my image cut out. So as you can see, it's going to be a little bit smaller than the page itself, but that's okay. As I mentioned before, that's not a deal breaker to me. But what I wanted is like nearly the full page. But I really thought it was interesting to put it on top of the stained dyed paper, because once again, you get that kind of really cool effect, not only with the writing of the words, but with the stained paper and the different effects that it gives. So I thought that was pretty cool. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to determine where I want, and that's pretty cool. Slide that over so you can see it. That's pretty cool too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I'm going to cut this down to size as well. So when I glue this, or not glue it, sorry, when I tape this down to my page, I want to make sure that my rough side of my transparency is actually facing down. And then I have the shiny side up, so that when I'm actually using it, over time, the ink from the transparency isn't going to rub off onto my other pages. I taped this side on, and I used my packing tape, but I found it kind of cumbersome. So I was going to go through and tape this side, but only using my Scotch tape. When I did this side, I only did the one side. I didn't tape the inside, I just taped the outside. But I made sure that I left a little bit of a gap so it folds quite nicely and it lays flat. So this one, I'm going to just use this. So I'm making sure that the rough side is facing down. And I want to make sure that this is centered right here. I'm going to take this off a little bit. Okay. And I'm putting this on and making sure that there's a little bit of a gap. And it's centered. Like that. I took my bone folder and I kind of made sure that that tape was really on my transparency. Now I'm going to flip it over very carefully so I don't rip my page. Making sure that there's a little bit of a gap. I don't think I'll have to put tape on the inside. I'll use my bone folder to just kind of straighten it out. And we'll see. There we go. So that works pretty well. So there's my transparencies. So when I write my words on it, I can just flip it over, write my words, and then my words will be shown underneath my transparency. There you go. Now on to my next one. For our next one, we're going to use this image. So this is already a signature page, and this image I'm going to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rip strips of colorful paper, and then I'm going to glue it across this portrait, and then that's going to be my space to write things in. And I just thought it would be an interesting new idea to use for writing. I'm going to rip like different widths, not too big because I want a lot of strips on this, but I'm going to rip different widths and different colors and stuff like that. They can be like, you know, they can be off-centered like that if I wanted to. Ripped my strips and I inked around the strips themselves just to kind of give it a little bit more depth. So this is what I came up with. Hopefully you can kind of still see the image underneath. And then these strips are going to be what I'll be writing my text on. So I'll start with the big strips first, kind of place them where I want them to be, and then the others I'll just place in there. Good. So you can still see the image underneath, but I thought it would be kind of a neat thing to add strips. So this is where I'm going to add my text on top of the strips as I write. All right, so we're going on to the next project. All right, for this one, we're going to get a little bit messy. This is my fourth signature in my group. And before I put in my 2 trees, because I'm going to have 2 trees here that are going to be folded in, because this is going to be my middle spread. So before that, I wanted to decorate the sides of the inside of the signature. So when you fold over the trees, you'll have something kind of funky here on the sides. So I have some rice paper here. I think it's rice paper. It's pretty cool. Has some like fiber in it. What I am going to do, it's going to be kind of messy, but that's all a part of art journaling. So this is Dynaflow, and you can use this on fabric and paper. I have never used these before, but they're supposed to be very, very vivid and bright. So I thought I would use this on this and just kind of play around with it. I have bright orange, magenta, sun yellow, golden yellow, chartreuse, and have scarlet, and turquoise, and violet, and periwinkle. Okay, so obviously I'm not going to use all of it or I'll just turn it into mud. So I'm going to choose some colors that I think that will really be bright and beautiful. So let's see. I kind of like this turquoise. I like this magenta, and maybe I'll use this golden yellow as well. So the others I'm going to just put to the side. I protected my cutting mat with 2 layers of wax paper. I have my gloves on here. And what I wanted to do is when I finish with this and let it dry, I'm actually going to rip it, because when it rips quite beautifully. And so I can kind of rip it down the middle here where the fold is, and glue those down onto my sides of my signature. I have some water here. So what I want to happen is I want to wet this first and then just see what these colors do. Hopefully they run and they can blend together. I don't want to get a brush and mess around with the colors too much. I want them to kind of work on their own. So I'm going to saturate my paper first. Really make sure it's wet, get all the bubbles out. So let's see, let's start with the golden yellow. And I'm just going to start with the drops. It's already kind of doing what I want it to do. Woo, yeah. All right. Okay, there's my yellow. And let's go with my magenta. So magenta can be, wow, very vivid color. Nice. Kind of mixing around there. Nice. Okay, and then I'm going to use get some stuff here, because this is actual dye. It dyes fabric, so it's not really paint, it's dye. But it says it works like paint, so not too sure about that, but we will see. Okay. And I think I kind of want to, there's some green here, this chartreuse green, kind of putting a little bit of that in here. Wow, that looks great. Okay, I'm going to add just a little bit more of my, well, maybe I'll add some of the sun yellow. It's a brighter yellow. Kind of brighten this up a little bit. Nice. Gotta make sure that this is completely kind of saturated. Oh, wow. Nice. And let them just blend into each other. Really nice. And I don't want to kind of mark this up too much. Maybe I'll add some violet. I think it needs some like really purple. Not a lot. Okay, the color definitely is vivid. So I'm just going to bring you in a little bit if I can. There we go. There. So this color is really vivid. I'm just going to get some rubbing alcohol, see what that does. I think I have a dopper actually. Yeah, I have a dopper here. Just see if that kind of does anything. Oh, kind of a little bit. I don't know if you can see it in the camera, but it's kind of doing a little bit. Kind of okay with that. So I'm going to let that dry and then we will come back. Okay, I thought I'd give you an update. I just didn't want to leave you there, but I found it a little bit too dark. So the white spots, this is still drying by the way, the white spots I just added acrylic white paint. And I don't know if you can see it here. Let me kind of zoom in as best I can. Probably not. I don't know if you can see it. Anyway, I put some very like dust glitter, white dust glitter onto it, and it almost kind of looks like a galaxy kind of thing. So we will see when this all dries and see how this turns out. So this is dried now, and it came out really well. So So I don't know if you can see sort of that sparkly dust on it. Yeah, you can see that a little bit, right? I'm gonna wait to put this on my signature. I'm gonna focus on my trees now. I'll show you how to attach this to my signature before we attach the trees to it. So these are the trees that I was referring to. So what I want to happen is that these trees are going to attach to the edges of my signature here. And then what's going to happen is they're going to fold out like that. So what I did with these is that I found this image on Pinterest, and then I put it up on my PowerPoint, sized it to the size that I wanted to, because I wanted it to be sort of the size of my signature, which these are it's a little bit smaller, but that's okay. That way they can open and close without any obstructions. When I put this on PowerPoint, I mirrored the image because I wanted the images to kind of be funky like that. So I mirrored these, and before I start cutting, because I'm gonna fussy cut this. Before I do that, I'm gonna put some ephemera on the back. When I printed these trees out, I glued them onto the back of some watercolor paper, so it's very kind of a thick paper. Before I start gluing on the ephemera on the back, I need to make sure that both of these are exactly the same size and where they're supposed to be. So I need to do a bit of trimming here. First of all, I'm going to determine, do I want it like this, my trees to be like that, which I really like, or do I want them to kind of go like this? I'm kind of like leaning towards this actually, just as a fold out, because remember down the middle, that's going to be my fold. So this is going to be a double spread, and I kind of like how that's going, how it kind of encloses on each other. So I'm going to start with this one. So first of all, in order for me to be able to attach a strip to this as my tabs so that I can glue it onto my signature edge, I need to trim this a little bit so that I have a lot of the tree that I can fold over. And I'm going to be doing the same to this one. So first of all, I'm going to trim this. So I'm just kind of eyeing it here, and if I imagine putting a strip here for my tab for my fold, there's not a lot to connect it to, so I have to kind of cut this back a little bit, which is fine. Then I have a lot more sort of to attach the tree to the edge of my page, and then I'll be doing this to the other side as well. I wanted to make sure that my doors, my trees were quite thick. That's why I glued them to the back of some pretty thick watercolor paper. These are to the right size. And remember, I want them to kind of go like that. Hopefully I don't forget that. These are going to be to the edge, and this is going to be in the center of my fold. So if I kind of just measure this out, open this up like that, and that's what I want, because you don't want it to be too close to the fold, because when you open up the layout, it's going to be it'll interfere with the fold, and then it won't go very well. So that's why I did this. So that's kind of the idea, and then they'll fold out. Before I glue my ephemera to the back of these, I want to actually put in a strip of paper as my tab to use as my fold. And I also want to add some ribbon to this, so that when I'm not going to struggle trying to get in here and fold them, so I can just use the tabs to kind of just fold them up. So I'm back. I've cut ribbon. I don't want my tabs to be too long so that they're kind of really long, but I didn't want them to be too short that I would struggle to try to grab them. I cut them 2.5 inches long, roughly. And for my paper tabs that will act as my folds, I just used a page from an old book that I gutted one of my other books with. These are about 1 inch wide, just strips, and I just cut them to the length of the paper, so I don't need that anymore. Why I'm doing these tabs first before I glue on my ephemera is that I don't want the tabs to actually show on the back of my signature edge. I'm gonna try to glue it to this part, And then that's where this comes in, that will cover that when they're all glued in. I'm hoping it'll work out. That's kind of what's in my head. In theory, it's going to work out, but you know, as an art journalist, you know just as well as I do, experimentation, sometimes it doesn't go the way that we want to. But I'm going to give it a try. And I didn't want to have these tabs shown on the back. So that's why I'm gluing the tabs on first, then I'm going to glue the ephemera, if that makes sense. They're about the same length. They're about the good length of what this and this is. And remember, I'm going to be fussy cutting, so this part won't be part of my tab. I only need the 2 tabs, and here's extra in case I do and mess up. Hopefully I don't. So I'm going to just put this to the side, and I already have a covering because I'm really like super cool like that. This is just wax paper just to cover my surface. So I'm going to use just some white glue. I'm going to use a paintbrush. Now I got to remember that I'm going to be gluing these tabs to the correct to the correct sides, because I don't want this to end up and kind of blowing up in my face. As you remember, I kind of want them going like that. Let's start gluing these. This is pure glue. I have not watered this down. So I'm going to use my lines a little bit here to kind of guide me, because I want these to make sure that they're on straight. This is going to be really finicky, which is fine. But I just find that, you know, when you take those steps as you're constructing, it kind of makes things sort of flow a little bit better because you're glad that you took those steps. So that's okay if it overlaps a little bit here and here and here, because once again, I'm going to fussy cut, and so this will all, so this is where the flap's going to be in here. Okay, and that's what I want. So while I'm here, I want to also glue my ribbon down, putting it as in a loop like that. This is kind of where I want to put it on the back. Kind of hold it down and just mark it lightly with a pencil. That way I know where I'm gluing this down. I wait till this glue dries completely and gets really hard, because I don't want sloppy glue and me trying to do this and then it doesn't work out. I don't want to do my ribbon too far out, but I don't want it too small that I can't grab it. So, because once again, I want the back of this ribbon to be covered by my ephemera. What I do to make sure that my pages are flat after I've done a lot of gluing, I have a really large tile and I have a huge brick. I put the wax paper between my pages, and then I put the tile on, and then I put the brick, and it just flattens completely out. It's really great, actually. I'm just gonna start a little bit with my ephemera. Now, how I'm going to do this is that I'm not going to, I don't want to glue on top of this, because then it makes it, for me, it makes it kind of shiny and glossy and tacky, and I don't want it to be tacky. I just want to glue this down. So I'm trying hard not to kind of put the glue on top of my paper. That's just me. That's just my preference for this project that I'm doing for this. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and have you watch me do all of this, because that's kind of torturous. Who wants to do that? Even if I speed it up, it's kind of boring. Okay, like that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna put my ephemera on top of this, cover all of this, and I'm gonna do it to the second page, and then I will come back. So I have let this dry. I put it down on a flat surface and put my brick on it, and it's dry now. So the next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to color this. I have these markers that it's a brush on one end and a fine tip on the other, so I'm going to use the brush. I'm going to color my trees, and then I'm going to fussy cut it out. I can start coloring them to just show you how I'm doing it, but then I'm going to stop the video and then just pick up where I start to cut. I'd like to kind of do it at the same time, so they don't have to look exactly equal, but so that I'm not doing one at a time. Because it's really detailed, You can see that. Just kind of going in a little bit. So it's almost like a coloring book. This will take me some time. So I am going to go off camera, finish coloring these, and then I'll be back to start cutting them out. So I have colored my trees with my felts. Okay, tried to mirror them as best as I could. So now I have an X-Acto knife and I'm going to cut them out. So there are a few branches here that are quite thin, and that was the purpose of me putting this on a thick watercolor paper. And me putting the ephemera on the back as well has reinforced this, so this is quite thick. So I'm hoping, my idea is that when I do cut this, it's going to stand up and it's not going to be limp and flipping back and forth. So I'm hoping that it works out because I do realize that there are very, very narrow spots in this. So I'm just going to cut this, take my time, cut this out very, very carefully. So after I cut this out, I'm going to go over the edges with some distressing ink, just so I can get rid of those white edges and it all uniforms the entire piece. When I cut this out, I'm going to cut this through the tab so that the tab should only be on this part and this part. I'm going to do that and I will come back once this is all cut and I have inked all around it to hide those white edges. So I've cut out this one tree, and I discovered as I was cutting it out that these branches here would really be too thin. This one is really, really thin. I cut that as I said I was going to do, but it really left this branch or this part of the tree very vulnerable to bending. So I reinforced this strip once again, and the strip is going to go all the way down, and hopefully that will kind of reinforce this little piece right here. Also with the other branches, I kind of I left a little bit of an area. I'm just going to go back in to these branches with my brown felt and just fill those in the best that I can, just so it kind of looks a little bit better. I didn't like it was so thin that it would just, through time, it would fall apart, and there are some very vulnerable branches and parts. So I'm gonna do the same thing with the other one, and I'll probably reinforce this because this is cardstock, and I'll reinforce that as well. And I did that on the back. I just wanted to let you know of what I was doing with this tree. So this has been cut out. Now I'm going to cut out the second one, and once I do that and color all of this stuff in and get it all prepped to go on the page, I will come back. Okay, so I am back. So I have colored, I've cut, and I have taken my brown marker and gone around all my edges. Now we're going to connect the trees to the sides of the signature. So in order to do that, we're going to do some double-sided tape and just tape it down here. So here's my tabs here, so I can open and close. What am I actually gonna do is I'm gonna use this there's just a little lip right here, because this paper is so thick that you do kind of have just a little bit of a lip, which is good because it's kind of a guide. And I gotta make sure, okay, that's on the right side. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take off the tape, then flip it over, and the tape's gonna go on top. Because remember, I made this, and then I'm going to rip this up to have the length of the signature, and that's going to cover this. And I want to make sure my tree is kind of in the middle of my signature. I'm gonna wait until these dry and then I will come back. Okay, these have dried and now I'm gonna put this on the two sides. So I'm just gonna put this to the side. Okay, and let's see how this looks. Okay, so we got this one to go here and this one to go here. And that's okay if this goes off the edge a little bit. The main point of it is that I just wanted it to kind of cover this. Now, let's hope this works. So I'm gonna fold this side over first, using this lip here. Score this a little bit. So scoring is that you cut the paper, but it's just very, very lightly, and you don't cut all the way through the paper. So it's come up just a little bit there, but that's okay. That doesn't bother me. At least it's folded over. I'm happy about that. So there you go. Ooh, very woodsy. I like it. So there is my double fold out. So if I get this, because this is my fourth kind of page in here, I'll put this all together. Okay. So we did this one with the torn paper, right? And this one was just another one that this one's my transparency, and so I can just write my words, and when I fold it over, my words will show through my transparency. Then as I fold this to my double spread, right, opens up, very nice. Turn my page. There's the other side of my transparency. Okay, and folding it over, and there you go. So that is our 6th signature. Hey everybody, in our next episode, as I mentioned before, I'm going to show you how I am going to Croptic stitch all of my signatures onto a hidden spine. So join me, like and subscribe, and we will see you next time.